For the best online experience, please select your speaker view and we will get started. Welcome to the first live session in the Global Pandemic Passport Stamp Series. I am Anita Magaha, the Director of Disability Services. I have the privilege of introducing everyone to our facilitator this morning, Dr. Thomas J. Tobin. Thomas Tobin is the Program Area Director for Distance Teaching and Learning on the Learning Design Development and Innovation Team at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as well as an internationally recognized speaker and author on quality and technology enhanced education, especially copyright, evaluation of teaching, practice, and academic integrity, and accessibility of universal design for learning. He holds a PhD in English literature, a second master's degree in information science, and professional certifications in program management, online teaching, quality matters, and accessibility core competency. Tom serves on the editorial boards of Insight, a journal of scholarly teaching, the Journal of Interactive Online Learning, and the Online Journal of Distance Learning Administration. He is also an author, and he has several books, including Evaluation Online Teaching, Implementing Best Practices. He has another one, The Copyright Ninja, Rise of the Ninja in 2017, Reach Everyone, Teach Everyone, Universal Design for Learning in Higher Education in 2018, and Going Alt-AC, a Guide to Alternative Academic Careers in 2020. I hope you are ready for an exciting and interactive session with Dr. Thomas J. Tobin. Please unmute your microphones now, and let's give Dr. Tobin a big blue TSU welcome. Dr. Tobin.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
This is awesome, and thank you very much, Miss Anita, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to all of you for being here for this session. I'm pleased to be working with everybody. You heard Anita Magaha talk about all of the books I've written and all the degrees I hold, all that stuff. What it really means is I tell my nieces and nephews that I'm in 42nd grade right now. So to get us started, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Robbie Melton for inviting me to work with all of you to help get ready for what the summer and fall will bring, even though it might be a little uncertain. And I see Dee Malloy in the chat says, I have a copy of your comic book. Awesome, way to go. But this isn't about me, this is about you all. And so what I'd like to do is set up a real quick housekeeping with everybody about how we can connect, and also tell you that you're not going to be listening to me for an hour. So as we start thinking about what's coming down the road, on your screen you see a faculty member reaching down from a ladder to help a student pull that student up. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I also want to share that we're going to be focused mostly on all of you. So we're going to use the chat feature quite a bit here. There's more than 80 of us in this live session. And if you happen to be watching the recording, please play along. Grab a pen and a paper or some other way of taking notes and jot down your ideas and listen to what your colleagues are saying here today. So on your screen, there's an image from the 1923 silent film, Safety Last. That's the Harold Lloyd one where he's dangling high above the street and that clock face is rapidly disintegrating. So as we're looking ahead to summer and to fall of 2020, if you had to choose one, what's your biggest concern about the interactions that you will have with your students? If you'd like to come on the microphone, please use the raise a hand feature. You can see that under participants here in Zoom, or just key it into the chat and we'll give voice to it together. But what's your biggest concern about the summer and about fall of 2020? I have Nicole Arrighi has raised your hand. Would you unmute yourself and come on the microphone, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Quality online content or instructional content for our student users.
Okay, so a concern about is the content that we're creating, do we have enough time and resources to make it good? If I'm hearing you right.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. We've got some in the chat here. Here's from Samantha saying, being as available to students as I am in my office. So how do we make those connections? And especially when our students may not be able to be connected to us. So a couple of more here coming in. Let me see if I can get here. Karen saying students won't get what they need. Oh, I guarantee you they won't get what they need. So how do we address that in a proactive way? And there's going to be things that fall through the cracks. That's almost a promise. But should we be sad about that? Should we throw up our hands and say we can do nothing? Heck no. And that's what this session is all about. Christine saying she's concerned about keeping students engaged and delivering clinical experiences. We're going to talk very specifically about people who have labs, clinicals, and practicums in this session. So I'm grateful to have that perspective here. Tamara is saying engaging students for active learning. So a +1 there for engagement. Adrian saying face-to-face interaction with students. Will we be able to have them? And what happens if we don't? Barbara saying tech support for problems with statistical software, Zoom problems. Yep, absolutely. And we've actually kind of got you covered, but we'll talk about why that might be so. Emily saying my concern is students feeling supported in the online platform. So that's another vote for quality, engagement, and interaction. Kenneth says getting students prepared technologically. And I have a couple of ideas here to help simplify that. That's awesome. John's saying trying to provide interactions other than lectures. Ooh, we can actually talk about that today. I love that perspective. I'm taking some notes here as we go. Gabriel says, I'm not sure how we'll make trusting connections with our new students via online platforms. I have a secret. I've been teaching online since 1997, and there are ways we can do it and ways that you don't have to spend lots and lots of time training yourself up. So we'll talk about a couple of those secrets today as well. Wendy says, I'm worried about switching between on-ground teaching to online teaching mid-semester with little warning. Oh, like maybe happened in the spring? Yeah. So that's something that we should be prepared for, and we'll talk about how to prepare it. Shiloh says, being mindful of community health while still giving quality education. Vandy says, I'm the resource librarian getting needed materials to students. So, by the way, yay librarians for today. Kelly says, meeting needs of students who fall in the gaps due to the lack of face-to-face. And we're actually going to talk quite a bit about where those gaps might be and how we can address them. David says, onboarding first-year students here. I see a couple of people sending me private messages. If you want, make sure that you're sending the chat to everyone so everybody can see what you're looking at. And let's see, ability to get engaged in the virtual learning and to attend classes. Let's see, Robin says keeping students motivated and engaged when they have a dislike to online learning. Ooh, and we'll talk about a difference between emergency instruction and online learning and why students might not like that first one and why they might like that second one better. Let's see, John says consistent performance of technology, access to Wi-Fi or devices. Yep. Donna's talking about students might lose their accumulated knowledge due to transitions. There's a silver lining here. They're really resilient. And let's see, Megan, students dealing with overwhelming cognitive, emotional, financial stresses, other things. That's not just our students, it's us too, right? Our kids are home from school. We have lots of things that we're juggling right now. So, and here's one from Wendy says, yay librarians. I'm gonna skip down here a little bit, ensuring students get clinical experiences that they need. So a lot of the themes that we're coming up with in terms of concerns have to do with practical, technical, emotional, and then just nuts and bolts kind of concerns about how do we do things. So let's address some of these themes that we're hearing here, and let's go ahead and talk about how we'll spend our time today. So here is a photograph from campus, and it's a number of buildings and some outdoor scenarios, and there's outlines of people here to show that people aren't on campus anymore. It's a hard reality. We've all been thrown into remote instruction, and we shifted incredibly quickly to good enough methods in the middle of the spring term. So now we're looking at fully remote courses for summer and maybe fall as well. And we definitely don't, I heard you when you were talking about your concerns, we don't have enough people or time to train everyone to become expert online instructors. And even if we did have that, there aren't enough resources or time to collect the materials, design the interactions, and set up the interfaces for fully online courses in a thoughtful and slow, painstaking, time-taking way. We have learned a few excellent lessons, though, and we can adopt 3 practices to make our summer and fall remote instruction courses go more smoothly for our students and for us. So we need to support our students' continued learning. We need to show compassion and flexibility for their varied circumstances, and that came out loud and clear in the conversation we just had. And we need to fit our efforts within our existing time and prep demands. So we have to be able to figure out what can we do with the time and resources that we have available to us. So here's how we'll use our hour in the webinar. On your screen, you see some Real Housewives of some county or other and Smudge the cat. This was a meme that was going around on social media recently. I have repurposed it, and the housewives are yelling, "You didn't leave any time for Q&A," and Smudge is saying, "Well, I covered everything." That's not how we're going to use our time today. Here in Zoom, the first 10 or 15 minutes, I'll share some ideas and practices to see if they spark with you, to see if they chime with something you're already doing or give you food for thought about how you might focus and narrow down your efforts. Then the remaining time is all for you. We'll use the chat feature and the raise your hand feature in Zoom to create a conversation around your goals and your needs. So without further ado, here are 3 ways to support your students during COVID-19. On your screen, there is an architectural rendering of a Tennessee State University residence hall building. You see some cars parked in the parking lot next to it. And parking near buildings with network signal repeaters may be the only way some of our students now have Wi-Fi access, right? It used to be that they would go to Starbucks or McDonald's, but now people are parking in elementary school parking lots because there's Wi-Fi. And so starting with the summer term, we're working with students who largely will choose to continue their studies with us remotely, right? Everybody signed up for face-to-face courses in the spring, and then COVID-19 happened. But now when we're talking about summer and fall courses, students who want that face-to-face experience, they might just sit that out for us, and that's actually kind of an advantage for us. So we can plan to have students who, by and large, are electing to be with us in the environment that we have with ourselves. I apologize, I was reading in the chat and somebody can't see presentations or pictures, and I just want to double check with everybody. You're seeing on your screen what I'm describing to you. If that's true, just put yes in the chat and we'll keep rolling here. All right. Thank you very much. And Dr. K, if that was you who can't see what's going on, our behind the scenes tech folks can help you out here. So, and there's a chat here as well from Mary saying she's happy with online teaching, feel that students are interacting more open and warm with each other. She worries about returning to campus this fall, concerned about a family member at high risk. What happens if I bring home an infection? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do we plan for mostly online, mostly interactive kind of stuff. And then we'll be in a good position to respond when the campus moves in one direction or another. So also on the screen, you see some words. And these are the 3 things that if you focus on nothing else, I'd like you to narrow down. You've heard lots of messages already about here are the 26 things that all faculty members and all designers should be doing in order to prepare for post-COVID fall term. If we focus only on access, assessment, and inclusion, we're actually going to be doing pretty well. So let's take each of these in turn. On your screen, you see the word access still, but now you have 4 images. And it's likely that you have in past semesters made some accommodations for students with, say, disability barriers. You know, alternative versions of readings or course materials, allowing for sign language or transcription helpers to come into the classroom, that kind of stuff. Now everyone has a barrier to access, social and technological distancing. So it's cool though, right? Some of your colleagues have been teaching online for more than 20 years and we've got you covered, right? You really need to focus here in only 4 ways about the access that your remote students have. So think about how you'll set up your students for getting access to course materials. In the top left of your screen is the CTLT. These are the folks who are sponsoring this webinar. And this is posting content into eLearn or Desire to Learn. This is using technologies that go outside your learning management system, like Google Docs or WordPress via the CTLT site. So students can just get at information and content. Also, you can provide them with more than one format. And in the notes for this session, to which you all have access, I've put a link to the free Ally tool that, that for free will convert your Word documents into Braille, read out loud, all that stuff. If you put videos, it'll make transcripts and captions for them. It's actually kind of fun, and they've opened it up for free during COVID-19. So giving people broad access and alternatives is now really possible. So students won't have to have special software on their devices. So that's one thing. Also think about access to one another. In the top right, there is another Zoom call that I was on recently with some of my co-authors in the West Virginia University Press Teaching and Learning series. And so make at least one space where students can talk with you and with each other. By the way, don't forget things like phone calls. Just because you're teaching remotely and you're using all these fancy online tools, sometimes a 10-minute phone call is the right way to go in terms of office hours, in terms of working with one another, in terms of talking to your peers, your colleagues, and your students. Also, bonus points if you set up one open-ended water cooler or course lounge space that's dedicated to anything but course-related talk in the learning management system. And then you can also set up other structured spaces where you tell students how you'd like them to engage or collaborate. Oh yeah, and if you've ever learned that an online discussion forum should be post once and reply to 2 people, get rid of that. That's just bean counting. Tell your students that the expectation is that they should move the conversation forward, and then show them what that looks like and what a good quality response is. But don't just have them respond for the sake of having 1 response or 2 responses. So that actually takes a lot of effort off of you as an instructor and a designer too. A third piece when we're talking about access, in the lower left-hand corner, it says you, and there's a picture, a stock photograph of an instructor who's got his laptop open, he's got his phone on the table, and he's doing grading in a book. And this was obviously taken pre-pandemic because he's got a coffee mug and he's got all kinds of time and all that kind of stuff. But the single best thing you can do is offer that 10-minute one-on-one phone call with your remote students who would like one. If you teach 200 students in a giant lecture and you offer this, only about 20 of them are going to take you up on it. So please offer. But just to say hi, check in, and ask after the first week, and then ask again before a big due date in your course. By the way, if you don't want them to have your cell phone number, then there's a service called remind.com, and you can set up a Google Voice number, and that's a way to get a cell phone number that connects to your cell phone but isn't your actual number, so you don't have to give that to your students. Again, all these things that I'm mentioning are in the notes for this session, and you have access to that transcript afterwards. So awesome deal for that. And the last piece when we're talking about access is the wider world. On your screen, you see some business folks doing some work here. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, but the more you can get your students away from their computers and their devices, the more engaged they're likely to be. Get them connecting with colleagues in your field, people in your community who work with your concepts. Get students working on real projects, real problems, or at least communicating and hearing the stories of those who are using the skills and knowledge that you teach. The less your course is a self-contained box, the better. So that's access. We've got 2 more to go. The next one's assessment, and you see lots of red ink on the screen, and I'll explain why that's true. So I imagine you're worried about students online cheating. Well, here's something we've been addressing since like 1997, and not with remote proctoring or software or plagiarism scanning software either. There's really only one thing that actually works when we're talking about academic integrity: lowering student anxiety and pressure. Now, I'm not putting on my rose-colored glasses here. I know that students will cheat in face-to-face environments and online, but the thing that actually makes the most difference, students aren't out there cheating any more than they usually do. And that's one, but one thing that could increase could increase cheating is putting students into a bind where they get tempted, like moving everybody into a hastily constructed environment with new norms. Now, most students don't act on these temptations, but we all have our tipping points. So the current shift to remote instruction can create both anxiety and pressure. And the best thing all of us can do, regardless of the subjects we teach or support, is offer students options, voices, and choices. So the first one here, there's a woman who, and her face has been replaced by a clock. And this means lower some time pressure. Don't put time limits on your online activities, including your exams. Go ahead and say you have to do the assessment within a date window, sometime between this Wednesday and this Saturday, but don't put a time limit on the actual assessment itself. That also means that when your students with disabilities need a little more time on the test, you don't have to go in and do something special for them. You just give everybody enough time to actually demonstrate their skills. There's also a calendar with a date circled and it says stress. That means lower due date pressure. Please allow late submissions, even if you lower the grade for such things. Now, I don't, but you do like you do, and that will lower some pressure there. There's also a scan sheet with a pencil here that's marked F. I really hope that nobody's giving out the red circle F these days, but sometimes students just don't get it. But lowers the grade anxiety in your course. One thing you can do that only takes you about 10 minutes is spread out the points in your course across activities so that you avoid having one big thing carry enough points to wreck someone's final grade. Or consider minimalist grading, specifications grading, or even ungrading, where you don't give numerical grades, but you still give feedback. These are all linked in the notes to this webinar that you'll have access to. So the last one here under assessment is lower communication anxiety. Please explicitly tell your students that you are open to hearing about the challenges that they face. Give them multiple ways for making contact with you if things don't go as planned. Actually say that you're willing to accept late work or offer extensions or think of accepting revised work. Whether you're willing to do it, say it so that students don't feel that you're unapproachable and that they have no choice but to make the grade any way that they can. All right, we got 2 out of 3 down here, and here's inclusion. And there's 4 things on the screen here as well. This practice could easily have been first in the list. Even in ordinary times, our students can get the sense that they don't belong in our classrooms for both overt and for unintended reasons. And the Black Lives Matter protests that have been sprouting up all over the world really speak to this feeling of being included or not being included. So in our classrooms, all the examples we provide maybe show middle-class white people in them, or the textbook isn't really diverse in its examples that are given. We don't use language that includes all of our students. They don't yet have models for how to respond when we challenge their assumptions and ideas, or they don't feel safe in our conversations. Now, I know that a lot of you on this webinar are doing good work in this area, and being intentional here is what makes the change between feeling apart from and feeling a part of our conversations and our classes. And there's a quick question in the chat about the previous topic. Samantha says, if we give everyone 2 days to take an exam, a student with time accommodations wouldn't get 3 days for time and a half. No, probably not, actually. Usually the accommodations for students with disabilities involve things like needing extra time during a sitting of an exam. So if we would have done that face-to-face and given people an hour and given someone else an hour and a half, then you can still take as much time as you need within a particular date range. And I'd encourage you to get with your Office of Disability Services to find out how best to listen to your students with disability challenges and other barriers as they're going through the interactions with you and you're planning for them. So you've got lots of resources at Tennessee State to help you out with those. And it's actually a really good segue into inclusive thinking and design. Now, I've heard people say, buck up, college is where you learn how the real world works, or we can't cater to every snowflake, poor us category, right? I've heard that stuff. But there's a business continuation, like keeping the lights on at the university reason, to adopt inclusive practices as well. It's even more important when we aren't there in the classroom physically with students. Those students who have a sense of belonging, choice, a voice in their classes, safety, control over their circumstances, those students are more than twice as likely to persist from class to class, to be retained from year to year, and to recommend our institutions to their peers. As you look at the interactions that you will design for your students, think about inclusion in 4 ways. The first one, there's a person walking through a doorway in the word language, and the idea is think about your practices. Be intentional about diversity and inclusion in your use of language, in the examples you use, visuals you use, self-direction and personalization when it's possible. So getting people to talk about the diversity in your class and in your field. There's a woman with her hand up in the symbol for stop, and it's about awareness. So study when you can about countering invisible oppression, recognizing microaggressions, avoiding labeling, referring inclusively about gender, race, and ability in your conversations with your students. Then tell your students, say it out loud, that your space is a welcoming one along these dimensions. There's a word cloud with things like ethical, ethics, honesty, sincerity, morality, integrity, trust down in the corner there. And that's to remind us to think about cultural relevance. Consider how interactions are intelligible to people whose native language might not be English. How to frame difficult class conversations. If you talk about things that are challenging, if you talk about issues and concerns where not everybody's going to agree, help your students to understand that it's a safe place to have multiple viewpoints, and help your students to understand how to talk with one another in those areas. How do you create that shared understanding, let's say, of academic integrity standards? What counts as good work in our class? And the last one is community. Foster a sense of belonging, being a part of instead of apart from, and give first-generation college learners a template for how to be a student in this environment. A lot of your learners don't have good models at home from their brothers and sisters or parents who remember what college was like for them. So help them out. Give them signposts for how to be a student in your particular environment. And this works a lot against imposter syndrome. Oh, I don't think I should be here. Everybody else knows this, but I don't. So that was the presentation part of it, and we're right here at the half hour. The other half of this hour is all for you. On your screen, you see a garden statue of the Buddha, and the Buddha is on his laptop, and he is communing with I don't even know what. But also on the screen, there's all the 3 pieces where you probably can focus most easily and most effectively as you are thinking about remote instruction for the fall. Access, assessment, and inclusion. And there's also all of the 4 sub-items in each of those pieces that I just mentioned. I'd like to open it up now and see, now that you've heard our conversation, think about some things here. Referring back to these big concerns, what are some specific practices that you see as possibilities for your course prep now? What are questions that you've still got about any of the connections that we've been making? What are ideas that you have for collaboration or for design work? And what are things that you're already doing that we've underlined as important or effective? So basically, what are you thinking? How are you working? And I also want to go back to a couple of those pieces. We talked about quality, availability, and we also talked about the hard things like clinical and lab work. So we'll get to those, but I want to open it up and see what's chiming for you right now. You can key that into the chat or use the raise your hand feature, and we'll bring you onto the microphone and we can join the conversation together.
Here is one question that is coming up all the time, and that is, how can we help faculty to transition content online? In other words, how do we just take, or should we just take PowerPoints or what? Because with COVID-19, we were stuck and caught. We had Zoom, but what about the rich content? What about the modules? And are there strategies in presenting content to students in a universal design environment?
Absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Melton, for kicking it off. There's really two different things that we can do. One is think about, where do your students in your face-to-face classes always have problems, always ask the same question 700 times, always get things wrong on the tests and the quizzes, and you end up having to reteach. Those pain points, those pinch points, are the places where you probably want to give people content and information first. If you are thinking about your courses for the fall as online repositories of interactions, get away from thinking about the materials, get away from thinking about covering content, and start thinking about, how do students interact? How do they interact with the materials? Yes. But how do they interact with one another? Where do you want to ask them to collaborate, to communicate, to talk to one another? Kind of like we're doing right now. Where do you want them to interact with you as the instructor or a support staffer? I hear we've got a lot of librarians, we've got some developers, we've got some designers, some IT people on this webinar as well. When you have interactions with students, whether they're calling the help desk or they're setting up a tutoring appointment, how do you want them to interact with you? And if you can create directions for those and space for those, that's going to serve you well, regardless of whether you're on campus in the fall or you're blended or you're fully remote. The third piece, when we talk about moving content to online, is chunk it up.
Yeah.
Think about the time that your students will spend interacting in each of those ways. So if you want them to interact with content, yes, go ahead and give them that 12-page journal article to read, but at the same time, think that that's probably almost an hour worth of reading. So you might want to say, here's the first part of that journal article, and then have a pause for interaction, have a pause for them to take some action. And then here's the second part of the journal article, and then another pause to talk with your colleagues or take some notes or write something down. The idea of taking a pause is actually what makes things stick in our brains. And we do this, by the way, in our face-to-face classrooms. Almost none of us stand up for 60 minutes and lecture at people. We pause, we say, hey, is this sinking in? We give a concept and then we say, let's try this out, or let's test this, or let's interrogate it. So excellent question to get us started off, and thank you very much for getting it rolling. I see a couple more questions in here in the chat. Let me give voice to some of those. Let's see. John is saying we have invested heavily in in-person classroom technology. Clickers, I'm thinking like that, video cameras, that kind of stuff. How can we reconfigure that technology to help faculty members deliver quality online lessons? This is a good question to raise campus-wide, because if you have your one-button video studio, or you have lecture capture classrooms where you've got video cameras already set up, you can put those things to good use if faculty colleagues are willing to come to campus and do some recording. Now, I'll also say that the best approach is not to try to create live sessions for your students to attend, but to create asynchronous, to create videos that students can watch on their own time, to create discussions that take place over a series of days, and then have any live sessions be the option for students. Because our students, they have work responsibilities, family responsibilities, military service responsibilities, all those things. And their kids are home from school, and they're also caring for their families, they're caring for aged parents, all different kinds of caregiver responsibilities as well. So, can everybody come to the live session that you have scheduled? Probably not. So if you have the approach of providing access wherever students are, doing the assessment in terms of when you can and how you can, but still keeping the rigor there, and then be inclusive to students by not doing live as the default. Make live the option, and then do the asynchronous stuff as the must do when you can throughout the week or throughout the unit. So John, excellent question there. And that's going to be a decision that your campus will make as well. If you have technology in the classroom and faculty members are willing to come back to the classroom, even if the students aren't there, that's a decision that you'll make together. There's a couple more questions here in the chat. Let me get to them, and then I'll get to Deborah, who's got a hand raised. Hang on a sec. And Barbara says, when mentoring students on their senior projects, how do you keep them from disappearing and checking out? This actually gets us to an earlier question at the very beginning about how do we do clinicals? How do we do labs? We have students who are going to be out there on placements. And as we get into the fall, we hope businesses will start opening back up, hospitals will start opening back up, and our students will be able to go out on their clinical rounds and rotations again. How do we keep them from disappearing and checking out? How do we keep in touch with them? There are actually really good models. I'd encourage you to look at the University of Iowa. They have a nursing clinical program where they're using their learning management system. They're also a Desire to Learn or eLearn school, and they're using the LMS as a way for students to post clinical responses. So the students record a quick video on their phones about their experience, and they post it up into the learning management system or post it up into YouTube. And then they schedule some time with their mentors, with their supervising professors, to have a 10-minute debrief, to have a really quick check-in. And that's one of the ways that we can keep them from disappearing and checking out. One other way when we're mentoring students on longer projects is to make sure that there are due dates that are milestones inside that senior project. We all know that the worst thing we can do is assign an end of course project for students, whether they're our seniors or whether they're our freshmen, and then say, oh yeah, we trust that you know your time management, and just get it done by the end of the semester. And what you end up with is a whole bunch of work that was done 2 days before the due date. So scaffolding in milestones and saying, here's where you should be, here's what's due now, here's a way to scaffold your ideas. And of course, pitch that to the level of students you're working with. If they're freshmen, you want to do a lot of that scaffolding and structuring for them. If you're working with seniors on senior projects, you want to help them to put that schedule and structure together themselves and report it to you. And we've got a whole bunch of other folks who have who've put in some chat things here, and I see a lot of names and email addresses, so I'm going to slide through here. But before we get to the chat again, somebody had a hand up and wanted to come on live. So who was that? Please come on the microphone.
That was me, Dr. Deborah Burris Kitchen. I'm the chair of the Criminal Justice Department. And my main concern is I've been on both sides of this, where I've taken a class that kind of got thrown into being online at the end of the semester, but I also teach online. And I just don't know how to get the students, because I saw it when I was taking the class as well, to actually look at what's going on in eLearn or in whatever program they're supposed to be following, or they don't read the syllabus or whatever. Because I had students that were in class with me go, well, how did you know that assignment was due tomorrow? I'm like, well, because I got online and looked in eLearn and all the assignments are there. But I don't know how you keep them, especially if you're not in the classroom with them. How do you keep them checking in and seeing what those assignments are and wanting to, staying engaged enough to want to?
Absolutely.
And
Robert, your microphone is on. Thank you, sir. Sorry about that. And to go back to Dr. Deborah's concern about how do you keep the students engaged and how do you get them to look in the learning management system, there's an official answer and then there's a sneaky answer to this one. The official answer is make sure that you are sending out messages in places that students will look. And what that means is almost nobody is checking their tnstate.edu email address every single day. It's just a fact, right? Students don't check their official email. So if you are able to connect with them before the class begins or at the very beginning of the class and send out an email and say, hey, if you got this email, just shoot me back a quick question or a quick confirmation, or even better, go to a service like remind.com and set up a text messaging service for the class. Students give the service their number, you give the service your number. Nobody ever sees each other's numbers, but then you can send out a text message to everybody in class. And those text messages can be, at first, hey, by the way, this due date is coming up. Be sure to make sure that you have the reading done for this particular unit, whatever it is. And then the text messages can be things like, be sure to log into eLearn and check for due dates. And you can scaffold your way and wean your way away from being the reminder for the students to getting students into the habit of checking for the environment itself. So there's a couple of different ways we can go on that. And thank you very much for coming on the microphone and sharing that question. We've got some more here in the chat as well. Christine says, I use the chat room feature with my classes this week to do small group case study assessments, and then they presented on the case to the group. The students loved it, even though it was just feedback with no grade. Christine is unearthing something really important around assessment. I mentioned ungrading. Even if you don't go that far and just chuck letter and number grades out of your course, definitely have time for practice. The best thing you can do for your students is take some of the things that now have a grade on them and turn them into interactive practice where you still give the same kind of feedback that you would give, but you don't put a grade on it. And that will help your students to say, oh, well, now my professor actually cares enough to help us get it right before we have to get it right for the grade. So excellent comment on that one, and I appreciate being able to build on it here. Megan says, one thing I noticed is you verbally describe the imagery on the slides very naturally in the course of the talk. This is a great accessibility strategy, like a kind of oral alt text for the image. Yes, that's on purpose, and thank you for noticing, Megan. Megan says she already includes alternative text for images in the slides to help students accessing it who have visual issues, but I didn't think about including a natural description in the talk itself. It surprises me how easily you were able to fit that in. By the way, all of you who don't have visual challenges, me describing what's on the screen helps you follow along better too, right? Any kind of radio program, listen to how they do description of what they're talking about. I was listening to a radio report on the Black Lives Matter protests in the city where I live, and the person who was doing the reporting was describing the scene. That's what you do for your students, and describing the scene, regardless of what the scene happens to be, means they're going to be more engaged and pay attention better. And I'm scrolling down here. Dee Malloy says, are note takers still helpful for some students online? How do you make materials accessible online? I'll actually say that you've got two awesome places, the CTLT and your Office of Disability Services, who have materials on their websites right now for how to make materials accessible. And I'll also put in another plug for that Ally tool, A-L-L-Y, that is free for everyone to use right now. And it is a way to automatically make accessible versions on demand from your students and from yourself. And are note takers still helpful for some students online? Heck yes. The disability barriers that some of your students experience, they don't just go away because we've shifted to a different way of teaching. In fact, a lot of people now have barriers who didn't have them before. So I'm thinking about my students who don't have a laptop or a desktop computer at home, but all they have is their mobile phones. Do students prefer to learn on their mobile phones? Actually, they kind of don't. We have national data from the folks at Oregon State University that show that students prefer, when they're learning with technology, to have a laptop or a desktop computer. But some of your students, all they've got is the phone. And if that's all they've got, then if there are ways you can reach out to students and make things accessible for them on their phones, that's going to be a good thing. Another webinar in this series is going to be about universal design for learning. Dr. Melton alluded to that in her first question in this open conversation, and that's going to be coming up later on here in a couple of weeks. So I'd encourage you to come back and we'll dive deep on making things accessible online. And Liney says about Karen's question, I found that making sure I direct questions and dialogue prompts to specific students. It's a classroom management task. I may not rely on it in classrooms when there's not that one student taking more than his or her share of everyone's time, but in that classroom it helps. And when I actively direct the conversation, I think more about bringing reluctant contributors into the process. Liney is surfacing something awesome about remote instruction and online teaching. If you're shy or reluctant to talk, or you don't feel that you are safe talking in a face-to-face classroom, you just remain quiet. In an online environment, if you're not participating, you're not there. And so there's a little bit of distance there, and that creates more of a safe space for people to talk about their ideas, talk about their thinking process. And if you are able to design in anonymous ways to give feedback using things like Poll Everywhere or survey tool in Desire to Learn, and if you are asking people to write down their thoughts ahead of time and then share them in small groups, and then have the small groups report out so nobody actually knows which thought came from which person, you're going to get richer conversations in there. And Dr. Melton says that TSU Global Online has purchased tools so that faculty may insert their assessments and tests at any point within their Zoom recordings, and they're going to do a webinar to introduce that tool. Splendid. John saying smart boards with interactive boards, projectors, document cameras, not so much cameras for video production of delivery. By the way, if you have a shoebox and you have a shoe and you have your cell phone, you have a document camera. Put the shoe inside the shoebox. Tip the shoebox up on its end. Insert the phone under the lid of the shoebox so it's hanging off the shoebox and the camera is pointing down, and suddenly you have a document camera that you can put whatever you want, a textbook, a live specimen underneath there, and you can record video at home for your students so that you can replicate some of the things that you do. And those of you who teach sciences and labs, you kitchen chemists out there, this is an opportunity to get creative. It's not a perfect solution, but it does help quite a bit. And I hear a couple of people have unmuted. Did anybody want to come on and take part in the conversation by voice?
Yes, could you repeat the shoebox again?
You bet. As a matter of fact, I will send around after this webinar is done. Bonnie and Dave Stahowiak, and no, don't ask me to spell that. They have a video on YouTube about how to do the shoebox camera. And if you search on YouTube for shoebox hug camera, you will find them. So excellent. Thank you very much. Let's see, from Dr. Briggs, how do you ensure students do not procrastinate on assignments if weekly due dates are not used? I would say use weekly due dates. Just because you are teaching in a different method or a different modality doesn't mean that you shouldn't scaffold things and have units that begin and end. I will say, though, that the rookie mistake is to make things due at midnight on Sunday, because then you're going to get questions at 11:30 p.m. on Sunday night. I make my units roll over at like noon on Monday, and that way I get questions when I'm actually at work and can respond to my students. Having your units roll over or new things happen during working or business hours is a way to give people greater access. And Dee Malloy says, I mean, how do you make materials accessible on video too? That's putting transcripts, that's making captions. And if you are doing the lazy person's version of that, upload your video to YouTube, let YouTube do the automatic transcripting and captions, and then go in and fix them. It's not perfect, it's better than nothing though, and it's fast. Let's see, and Dr. Melton, right on it. TSU Global has purchased closed captioning for videos within your course. So you can talk to the folks at TSU Global online and they will help with captions. So I love that it's just part of the way you do it at Tennessee State. That's awesome. And let's see. Oh, and here's another thing from Dr. Melton. TSU Global Online has hired additional staff to help faculty convert their courses to online delivery. And they have faculty mentors who support faculty members during their fall classes. So What I love is that this task is not just on your shoulders, instructors. It is a team effort. It is a team sport for sure. So I'm grateful to be able to share that you have people who can assist, help, guide, and think alongside you here as well. And I'm skipping down a little bit here. John says, how do you help faculty to transition from assessments requiring content recall to assessments that require evidence of using the content and presenting, evidence of critical thinking and performance? Some of our assessments do prevent evidence of critical thinking and performance. So that was my Freudian slip there. In terms of, for those of us in the sciences, especially if you're used, or in business, if you're used to giving great big multiple choice tests and examinations that are just content recall, and a lot of us teach introductory courses where students just need to know the concepts and ideas. So in those courses, it is entirely appropriate to ask for content recall. How do you keep students academically honest in those instances? Make sure that you are using question pools. For every concept that you want the students to know the content, create at least 3 different versions of that question. That means change a couple of numbers around. That means give the question in a different way. And then use the question pool feature in eLearn so that no 2 students see the same set of questions throughout the test. You can also randomize the answers so that this person's A is this person's B is this person's C. You can also chop up the assessment for content recall so that students can only see certain batches of questions as they go. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use a learning management system to give those content recall assessments. But John is right. One of the things that we ask our more advanced students to do is get away from guessing or knowing the right answer. And we want them to help us to see that they know how to apply what they're doing. So in that case, what I do is I try to give my students options. If the final project is write me a 5-page essay that is your business plan for helping a local business with their marketing, then that could be a 5-page essay, but I could also grade that using the same criteria if that were a video pitch. And give your students a choice about how they demonstrate their skills, and we'll talk more about that in our Accessibility and Universal Design for Learning webinar later on. And I see that we've got a lot of folks here in the chat. I'm going to skip around a little bit. Do we have students contracting due dates individually, work well online to get around accessibility issues and keep students on track? In terms of getting around accessibility issues, I'm a big fan of designing accessibility issues away. Giving students more flexibility, more options to begin with means that fewer students will come to you with that piece of paper that says, hey, by the way, give me time and a half on the test. It doesn't mean we'll ever get rid of it, and I'll encourage everybody, come to that UDL webinar. We'll actually dive in on these things here. Mary's saying, I'm struggling with getting videos to students. I've tried different options and deciding to hook my laptop to a portable DVD player. I'm learning there are built-in blocks that could prevent that. Yep. In terms of the videos that you've got, your folks at the CTLT and your media services folks can help you to find versions of of commercial videos that you would normally share with your students. And they can put those things into database areas or Kaltura or the like that, and they can help you to get your students access to those things that's behind a username and a password. So I'll put you over there. Let's see, got a couple here. John says the MyTSU portal is more user-friendly now than ever before. That's awesome. Cynthia is saying students can also turn on their notifications in D2L. Yes, but that's students having to take the action. That's why I like getting their cell phone numbers and being able to send them texts. And here's a real hard question, and we've got time for about maybe 2 or 3 more here. How do you utilize the assessment policy of late submissions and lowering grade requirements for classes where students take assessments for competency, like the NCLEX exams? If you are teaching your students how to get the information that they need for a certification exam or a certification test, then giving them opportunities for practice and giving them feedback that is, here's how the test environment will be. Here's how you will be graded and assessed on the test. Whether you grade those practice sessions or not is up to you. But if you're teaching toward those tests, make sure that the learning objectives in your course actually match up with all of the parts of that certification exam and test. And I can tell you that your CTLT folks can help you with that question. So awesome deal. And let me just keep rolling through here. We've got a lot of good questions, chats, and IDs here. And Dr. Melton has been on the spot, and Dr. Sayai has also been on the spot finding the resources we've been talking about. And let's see, Barbara Kilborn, I find publicly available videos when possible, link to them in the modules in eLearn. Yep, absolutely. If you're still using Reef Life of the Andaman in your world biology course and it's from 1996, there's updated stuff for you and we can help you find it. And Michael says, students making content online to demonstrate competency meets them right where they are with technology that they're already using. And that's a really good note on which to start wrapping up here. We've got a couple minutes left. Before we do that wrap up though, is there anybody who wants to raise a hand and come on the microphone and share what you're thinking about or how you're thinking about takeaways here?
Yes, Deborah has her hand up.
Hi, Deborah.
Deborah, you can unmute yourself.
Or that might have been her hand from earlier and she might have forgotten to take it down. So no worries. So that was an awesome conversation. And you notice that we tried to give voice to as many of the things from the chat as possible and everybody coming on. On your screen are a bunch of Tennessee State University graduates at graduation. This is obviously pre-pandemic because nobody's got a mask on and everybody's smiling except that one guy, but he is still graduating. So I love the fact that your motto at Tennessee State is think, work, and serve. So as a last question for everybody, key it into the chat or raise a hand and come on the microphone. What is one thing that you will take away from our webinar time today? What's one thing that you have a practice that you're going to do, one thing that you're going to try out, whether it's an idea or a concept? And I want to thank you all for that focus on the think, work, serve way of being here. So what's your one thing? Take a minute and key that in. Take a minute and voice that with us. Not to time exams, using remind.com, making students feel more relaxed. Collaboration is key across departments. Synchronous options, even in asynchronous courses. Let's see, to make live sessions optional, being more flexible, better asynchronous practices like not having midnight due dates. Oh yeah. The video shoebox, remind.com, removing end dates in eLearn, breaking things up into pieces. I like that one. Text messaging, Google Phone versus email. Question pools in your exams, actively building supportive online communities, being descriptive with presented information. Thank you for noticing that. That shoebox camera is awesome. Add a course lounge to build community in the course. Question pools with 3 options, making live sessions optional, lowering communication anxiety. I've got ideas regarding structuring discussion and response assignments now. Awesome for that. Repeating the information in different ways, asynchronous videos with synchronous as optional, personal calls. People dig that shoebox camera too. That's awesome. Reduce student anxiety. I'll change my due dates to daytime hours. I'll provide discussions ahead of time and then break out to small groups. Shoebox camera, shoebox camera, shoebox camera. Bonnie and Dave Stahoviak are really grateful that y'all dig that. And a virtual water cooler for students. Becoming a resource and communicator. Visioning how I use the discussion board so students must engage with each other to move the concept forward. John says, continuing using practice and revision as stepping stones for key assignments. Feedback versus grades is a distinction. Yes, indeed it is. That's awesome. And how to get help with getting current resources to students. You've got your CTLT, your Office of Disability Services, your media services people, your librarians. After this webinar, I go away, they don't. So please reach out to them. And we've got a lot more here coming in along similar lines. So we're right here at time, and I want to turn it back over to Dr. Sayai and to Dr. Melton. But first, I want to say thank you to all of you for making time, and I hope this was a useful session for all of you to help you narrow your thinking, narrow your focus, and get ready for fall in a way that honors the fact that we're all busy and we've only got so much time and there's only so many of us. It's really heartening for me to know that you're not doing it alone, and you've got lots of people here to help you out. So thank you all for inviting me to work with you, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Sayai and Dr. Melton.
And then, thank you so much, Dr. Tobin, and all of you all for joining us this morning. I am going to turn it back over to Dr. Melton for final remarks, but I do want to remind everyone to please go back into our eLearn course shell for the pandemic workshop series. We do have a little mini assessment associated with this particular presentation, because we want you all to get your passport stamp for participating in this activity. And we do appreciate you taking out time today to join us. So Dr. Melton.
Yes, and again, Dr. Tobin, thank you, and faculty and staff. Tom will be back, not one more time, but two. Universal design, how to prepare for the fall. Again, on behalf of TSU Global Online, Dr. Cheryl CA, and bringing forth what I call quality teaching and training online, because online is more than D2L. It's more than Zoom. We're talking about the pedagogy, best practices of teaching. And please know, this will make or break any university if you do not have quality content online. And on behalf of the Office of Disability, we didn't come to you with, you must do this and you better do this. This is universal design for all. And again, we want to stress that because we're here for all students. So with that, I know you should have some anxieties about what's going on in the fall. What are we going to do as a faculty member? I'm here to share with you, I don't know. And those that know will not know, as things are constantly changing in the world. But what we do know, we must be ready. So on behalf of the Smart Center, Global Online, Graduate School, all of us, we want to take the position of, regardless of what, we are ready with quality courses and programs. I am so pleased to share with you all that we are offering this fall over 30 online programs, not just courses. We're talking full online programs from undergraduate to graduate. Not only that, we know that you need support. We are working right now for faculty members to have up-to-date and available tools and techniques so that when fall hits, you're not scrambling around or moving your desktop to your home. So please know that we are working, and that's why we need you to go into TSU eLearn with your passport so you can get it stamped, so that we know that you are ready and you will need some resources. Not only that, we know it is a hard lift to take on-ground content and move it to quality online delivery. With that, we are hiring an emergency hiring instructional designers, graduate students to help you. We know what it is to try and figure out, how do I embed a video right here in this module? Don't worry about that. We got you. We will have people to actually come and work with you to say, and where would you like it? And to teach you so that you also know those skills. And engagement. We know that after 20 minutes, if you're not engaged, you're going to start doing your email and still smile at the same time, or you're going to fall asleep, And we also know that if you're not what I'm calling stimulating in terms of academic, something going on between you and your students, that your students are going to lose out. We are going to prepare the students. In other words, just like we're having seminars for you all, we need to prepare our students for online instruction. This is the world now, and the world of work is going to be remote. So with that, we're taking a strategic look, not a Band-Aid, not a short term, to look at our workforce that's out there now. How do we handle virtual labs? We also know there are things you cannot do online. We know that. So how do we have music? How do we have ag? And please know, we are part of a national consortium to address all of these issues. We are praying that there is a vaccine to come, but you heard it, I heard it, it might take a year or so. With that, we have to look at what we're doing in terms of teaching and learning, as they now say, the new norm. So with that, I just want you all to know, to have over 100 people a part of this first webinar is not a miracle, it is a blessing. It is to say to everyone, we care about our students, we're ready to learn. And boy, are we going to learn. We got some tools for you all that you'll go, oh my gosh. We have a tool that when you do use Zoom, you can take that recording and stop it at any point and insert your assessment, your questions, your open-ended at any point. And all of those things are coming up. Proctoring, you worrying about, how do I do that? We got you. If you're worrying about, oh, wait a minute, what about students, tutorials? We got you. And where's Dr. Elvin? You know they have you. Our TSU librarians, come on, we're all online. Student services, online. Student health, online. And you all are now part of reshaping TSU. So again, I just want you all to know that this is just the beginning and life is good. So it is after 10 o'clock and you know that you can contact us. We will have training around the clock, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, holiday. We have 8 weeks before we open up. And everyone, you know my motto, life is good. So with that, any questions, you can email me, but please be safe. And I thank you all. And again, Dr. Tobin, life is good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Milton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Melton.
This is great. Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Thank you all for this
That was
incredible
awesome.
information.
Thanks,
Thank you.
TSU Global Technology Team.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
And hello, Dr. Johnson, Melvin Johnson. Life is good.
Life is definitely good. Thank you.
Dr. Melton, I have a question for you after everybody's gone.
Yes, I'll stay on.
Thank you. Or Dr. CA too.
And Dr. Melton, I'll get ready for the 10:30 that we have.